Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. It's one of those days around here we kind of sort of get to feel like newsmen, news people, I guess, anchors people, if you will, in that live coverage continues from Indianapolis. We'll check in with Mike Griffith later on. He's up there for all of that. We'll hear hopefully today from Malaki Starks before we're done. A little bit of the Warren Brinson stuff from yesterday. So ongoing, these former Georgia Stars trying to make their way to the NFL draft. We are covering that. That is really good. Also, in addition to that, off the top of the program today, the kind of former Georgia Gray in the NFL has sort of found himself, by no fault of his own, kind of in the center of some controversy. I think this is fun for a couple of reasons that we'll get to. It actually kind of walks us into a topic that's still ongoing for us here at Georgia as well. So I'm going to cover that ground with you. It's kind of just sort of an interesting way, to kind of kick things off today on a day when we have time to do it. So let's do it right now. And, of course, Terrence Edwards is a part of the program there as well. So we are jam-packed and fully loaded. But most importantly, it's you that are here, and we are glad that that is the case. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, to be completely honest, off the top of the show for a couple of minutes, we're just going to do like straight gossip. And I wish I could tell you it was more than that, but it's just sort of gossipy here for a second. However, we are going to lead this into, I think, two topics of note for Georgia fans. So kind of hang with me for the soap opera for a minute, and let's gawk at the drama. And then we'll kind of get to, I think, of a couple of things that will be of importance if you are a Georgia fan. So perhaps the biggest story in the NFL, which is obviously the giant sports league in America, the biggest story over the course of the last couple of days has been supposedly what has been going on with L.A. Rams quarterback and the former Georgia great Matthew Stafford. You may be aware the Rams have given permission to Stafford to sort of seek a trade and get out of L.A. and move on and do something different with his career. It sounds like there's a little bit of a disagreement about money there. Stafford would like to have more money, more years than L.A. wants to give him. Obviously, L.A. is appreciative of the fact that Stafford helped bring a Super Bowl to Los Angeles. But in a salary cap league, they just perhaps see a need to spend their salary cap dollars elsewhere, so Stafford is free to look around. And that is where things start to get interesting. There's a guy around the NFL, a guy on social media, I guess he works for Fox Sports. His name is Jordan Schultz, and he reported something this week that was quite eye-opening, because while Stafford is free to seek trades, we're not quite yet in the sort of what they call the legal tampering part of the year yet. We're still in the illegal tampering part of the year. And is Tom Brady, the Las Vegas Raiders, guilty of doing that? Jordan Schultz writes on X, Raiders minority owner Tom Brady recently hosted, that's a very important word here, Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford at his home in Montana, where they spent time together and went skiing. Now imagine having, first of all, let's just pause on this for a moment. Imagine having a home where you had private ski lifts. I'm led to believe that's what this must be. Private ski slopes. We already know that Tom Brady's living a very different life than we are. Perhaps, this is a example of that of, hey, Matthew Stafford, according to Jordan Schultz, why don't you come skiing at my house? That's a pretty big proposition to make to someone, and the kind of thing that most of us would probably not get our chance to say. But anyway, Schultz reports they were together. They went skiing. He says that Brady has been actively trying to convince Stafford to join the Raiders, and discussions are ongoing. Schultz goes on to say several teams are interested in Stafford if the Rams decide to move on him, with Las Vegas believed to be the most aggressive suitor. So the former dog getting a lot of attention here from the all-time great, the GOAT in many folks' eyes, Tom Brady, meeting together there in Montana, and reported by Schultz that he was hosting Stafford, which from the Raiders' perspective would be a little bit of a no-no based on the NFL calendar right now. Well, all of a sudden, you got the other NFL people kind of swooping in here to save the day, perhaps on behalf of the Raiders. Do you know who Rap Sheet is? Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network. Getting wind of what Schultz reported, Rappaport's got his guys. He now has a completely different take on this. I'll show you this on the screen, too. Once again, this is all just gossip. I totally get that. Most of this is just for fun for right now. But nonetheless, Rap Sheet NFL Network says Raiders minority owner Tom Brady and Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford. Now listen to this. This is so funny. It says they ran into each other at a ski resort in Montana, sources say, but the meeting was unplanned and it was not extensive or in-depth and did not include Brady, quote, hosting or, quote, recruiting Stafford, despite reports saying otherwise. Do y'all remember back in the, it's been a few years ago now, but during dead periods and things like that in recruiting that if you ever saw somebody, was it okay to say hello to them? This is how bureaucratic the NCAA rules were at one point in time. Y'all remember the old bump rule? Do you remember the bump rule? That if you ran into somebody like, oh, you high school, oh, there's so-and-so. Hey, bump rule, we can say hello to each other. Hey, can't do much more than that, but we can at least acknowledge each other's presence here. We can we can kind of trust the parameters of the bump rule to allow us to speak here a little bit. So what Rap Sheet is saying, the former Dawg Stafford wasn't hosted by Brady. They just happened to be in this remote place in Montana at the exact same time under the auspices of the bump rule. They're able to speak a little bit, but nobody was hosting, nobody was planning. No future plans were being discussed here or anything like that. Which, I mean, listen, I hate to kind of weigh in on this, but that's about the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I don't have this screen grab for you, but Jordan Schultz did respond to that, saying, if you really think that Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford just happened to run into each other at a ski resort in Montana, of all places, at the exact same time, I've got a bridge to sell you. Which, in this particular case, well, it seems like Rappaport's probably more famous than Schultz is. In this sort of instance, I sort of feel like Schultz is probably more in the right. In fact, if you'll permit me like one brief aside here. It's sort of a weird thing about social media a little bit, in sports media, I should say, a little bit, and the fact that what Schultz is reporting is, in my mind, probably true, but it is speculation. So therefore, it's kind of, in the eyes of some, maybe not good reporting. What Rap Sheet is reporting is, in my eyes anyway, probably false, but a source told him this, so therefore that's kind of considered good reporting. That's a weird thing to me about sports media, but nonetheless, that's perhaps a different topic for a different day. So anyway, you got Schultz saying this thing, you got Rap Sheet saying this thing, and here's where the soap opera takes an additional twist. According to, do y'all know, do you follow Barstool Sports? Do you know who PFT Commenter is? He's one of the hosts of Pardon My Take, the famous podcast. So PFT Commenter, pretty famous guy. So he reports this yesterday. This is PFT Commenter, famous guy. I'm hearing that there was literally a serious big-time media confrontation at Starbucks. This is in Indianapolis between two NFL newsbreakers where NFL security has been asked to step in. More to come, I'm sure. So as it turns out, the actual Pro Football Talk reported that the two insiders coming to blows nearly at Starbucks was Schultz and Rappaport fighting over the former Georgia great, perhaps being hosted by Tom Brady. Now, all of this is just soap opera drama, complete gossip, but I have to admit, kind of fun, kind of interesting. We'll have Mike Griffith on the show later on. We'll ask him if he happened to be at the Starbucks where all of this went down. Maybe Mike's got some first-person reporting he can give us on this. I guess the other thing of note here is I think this Schultz guy, if I'm right, he may be the son of Howard Schultz, who actually founded Starbucks. That's another, I guess, kind of fun wrinkle on all of this. But let me now take this sort of soap opera drama and kind of bring this back to Georgia here for a moment, because from a Georgia fan's perspective, I think this is interesting for two reasons. Reason number one is, what if this works? What if the former Dawg Stafford ends up in Vegas paired with another former Dawg and Brock Bowers? Like, how good would that be for Brock Bowers, first of all? Like how much would Brock Bowers have a chance to just reap the benefits of all that? Because I'll tell you this just briefly. When we do our DawgNation cruise every spring, one of my favorite things about our DawgNation cruise, in fact, my single favorite thing about the entire event, is the final night of the cruise. It's sort of our main event, grand finale for the entire week, is we always have our draft party on the final night of the cruise. We always watch the first round of the NFL draft and all the Georgia players get drafted. And last year, of course, there was a lot of happiness and celebration for Brock Bowers. But in addition to that, there were also a few people at our draft party who said, I'm happy to see Bowers get drafted as high as he was and I hope he has a great career. I'm a little bummed that he went to the Raiders. That was kind of the theme that we heard a lot. A little bummed that he went to the Raiders because the Raiders were, let's be honest, one of the worst run organizations in all of professional sports. But my, oh my, how things change in a year. All of a sudden, you got Tom Brady now stepping up as the face of the organization. You've got Chip Kelly recently hired as the offensive coordinator. From a Bowers perspective, that's probably a good thing. And now maybe you have a chance to catch passes if this drama and soap opera and, gossipy type stuff sort of plays out the right way. If you're Bowers, you have a chance to now catch passes from a former dog like Matthew Stafford. You're talking about a guy who accidentally sort of stumbled into an actually pretty awesome situation. If it plays out that way, we would say that's probably pretty good for a guy that already had a great rookie season on a really bad team with almost no quarterback to speak of whatsoever. All of a sudden now things from a Bowers perspective are actually looking pretty good. And I know Georgia fans would like the idea of Stafford, the sort of legendary old school dog, throwing passes to the kind of new school, recent addition to the NFL. That'd be a really fun thing for UGA. But more important than all of that, there is this. I think it's still really interesting that Matthew Stafford, who was, a freshman at Georgia in 2006, that's a long time ago, a rookie in the NFL in, 2009, am I right about that? That also starts to feel like a long time ago. This is a guy who's been around now for a while, but his cachet within the league, even at kind of an advanced age of his, look at that. We're watching, if you're watching video, this is sort of like stuff from Stafford who's playing at Georgia. Like, look at the grainy quality of that video. If you want to know how long ago it was when so-and-so played, all you got to do is sort of look at the video quality that we now have. Now, when this was going on, that felt like modern times to me because, honestly, I remember this era very well. But when you see the video quality, you're led to conclude, oh, yeah, maybe that's not quite such a recent time. Now, maybe some time has passed. But the point is, even though Stafford's Georgia career was a good while ago, well before I had kids, for instance, or anything like that, even though that was kind of a long time ago, Stafford is apparently still a very hot commodity in the NFL. Stafford is someone who still has a lot of cachet within the NFL, so much so that the Raiders, at least according to the Starbuck guy's son, willing to risk breaking NFL rules as a way of getting him to their organization. That gives you an idea of the brand that Stafford still has. And the reason why I think that's so interesting is because that is very, very different than the other prototypes we currently see for the current NFL quarterbacks. Look at the final four quarterbacks this year. Jalen Hurts, certainly an athlete. Josh Allen, an accomplished thrower, but this is a guy who's also pretty good with his legs. Mahomes doesn't run very much during the regular season, seems to always run during the playoffs. And obviously Lamar Jackson's kind of right there with Michael Vick as one of the great running quarterbacks of all time. That the quarterback position in the NFL has almost completely evolved to being an athlete's position. And it's not that Stafford's unathletic. Actually, at Georgia, he probably ran around a little better than some people gave him credit for. But we would say that Stafford is, if there's ever a museum like a Smithsonian of football and like there's a pocket passer's wing, Stafford's going to be the statue literally in the pocket passer's wing of, hey, this is what the sort of prototype processor of defense is, big arm, throwing to all parts of the field. That's what this guy was. Has some moxie, has some charm. That's what he was. And even in a time in which we are evolving with the quarterback position, Matthew Stafford still has a lot of value, and I find that to be interesting. Not just because he's a former Dawg and I still follow his career, although that's true, but because a similar question, I believe, is kind of also asked of Georgia right now as well. Because much like the transition is almost complete, the NFL almost has solely quarterbacks who also are very athletic. Boy, it seems like college football is becoming more about that too, where, the quarterback who can do it with his legs, at least keep plays alive, if not actually be a running threat. The majority of successful quarterbacks seem to have that characteristic, whereas if back in Stafford's era here at Georgia, there were a lot more of the more traditional pocket passers. There are fewer of those than they used to be. But if you've got a good one, he's still worth having. Matthew Stafford, the hysteria around him sort of proves that. Kind of leads us to what we've been talking about a lot this week when it comes to the five-star quarterback, Jared Curtis. Now, let me be clear about a couple of things here. Curtis and Stafford are not a perfect comparison for each other. I believe that Curtis is probably a better athlete coming out of high school than maybe Stafford would have been thought to be. I think that Stafford was underrated athletically. I think that Curtis is probably a little better with his feet than Stafford probably was. I think he's a guy that, you watch some of the highlights, you sort of see a guy who's sure-footed. In fact, we're kind of seeing him run right there a little bit. This is a better athlete than I think what Matthew Stafford was, but this is still a guy who's going to have that presence, that moxie, that ability to sort of stand there and kind of draw attention the way that Matthew Stafford would. The Raiders are apparently willing to sort of throw anything it takes to get that guy to come to Las Vegas. And in the case of the Georgia Bulldogs, how much are they looking to throw whatever it takes to get involved in Jared Curtis? Is Georgia going to be as aggressive in its pursuit of Curtis as the Raiders apparently are in their pursuit of the former Dawg, Matthew Stafford? This was actually kind of a hot topic last night on Jeff Sintel's show Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Our Cody Chavins did a great job stepping in as a co-host with Kaylee Manziel, the typical host in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. And when it comes to the aggressive pursuit of Curtis, it may not be a remote skiing lodge in Montana, but it is apparently going to be an awful lot of money. This is how much money it might be, according to Jeff last night on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger.
The fascinating part of this for me, Cody, is the number for Jared Curtis. I feel it's going to be somewhere between $2 and $3 million per season. On3 has his NIL evaluation at $3.1 million. So you start doing the math, and sorry, folks, the math is mathing here. But if you're paying your quarterback upwards of $2.5 million out of your entire pie of 13.5, that's a little upside down.
So what Jeff's talking about here is we're about to move into a revenue-sharing world where Georgia's going to start spending money out of its TV revenue and the big dollars it brings in, and instead of just having NIL, Georgia's now also going to be paying players through its revenue sharing. And when you start breaking down the percentages, you got 20 whatever million kind of going to all of athletics, a portion of that going to football, the largest share of that, which equals somewhere in the neighborhood of 13, 14 million. And then if you're talking about a quarterback in Jared Curtis commanding 7 figures coming out of high school, all of a sudden you're talking about a guy occupying a huge percentage. It's not quite a salary cap, but it sort of functions like that, a huge percentage of your cap. And the question that Jeff and Cody were asking last night on Before the Hedges is, does that end up being money well spent? I think it's a fair question to ask, and I think it depends on, do you see a guy like Curtis being as valuable to you as the Raiders see Matthew Stafford potentially being valuable to them? And as I said before, I do think that's the sort of question that needs to be asked. For what it's worth, Jeff went on to talk about the sheer financial ramifications of all of this.
If Georgia wins the Jared Curtis sweepstakes, even if, say Georgia gets it for 1.5 or 2 million, that's still a lot of money that Kirby Smart in Georgia, I believe, has never paid an incoming high school recruit, much less one on the offensive side. So that could really change the way Georgia goes about building its team, and it's worked tremendously well for the last 5 years. Now, let's say Georgia backs off the table and it's like, too rich for my blood. Well, then that goes to show you that Georgia is trying also to abide by some economics in terms of you can't give that one guy 22% of your roster salary cap when he might not play for a year and a half. So it's very big boy decisions are about to be made.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. They are big boy decisions. We've talked plenty about this in the past, too, that, hey, if you spend less on quarterback, we're led to believe Ohio State probably did that this past year. If you spend less on quarterback, it gives you more money to spend at other positions. And maybe this past season, Georgia would have been better off with less money invested in the quarterback spot, more money invested in other places. Perhaps that's true. There's a lot of thinking that suggests that might have been the case. However, I do think the Raiders' hysteria here and the media types fighting at Starbucks and all the stuff going on in the NFL this week serves as a pretty good reminder that while it's nice to think about spreading money around your entire roster and being balanced on both offense and defense, in fact, that's more than nice. That might be really, really important. As Tom Brady's showing you right now, there is still an incredible value to be put on the sort of franchise quarterback that has the potential of making everyone around him better. And when you look at the crop of quarterbacks that were available in the transfer portal here this year ahead of the 2025 season, we didn't really see those types of guys available. The types of quarterbacks you saw were maybe starters, but not program-changing players. That it could be true that if you want the program-changing quarterback, you've still got to get him out of high school. And in this day and age, if you're getting that guy out of high school, whether it's Georgia or Oregon for Curtis, you've got to be ready to pay big bucks to bring him in. Is that money going to be worth it? Is that the decision that Georgia should make? It'll be a fascinating debate on that topic as the next few weeks play out. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Glad you are with us. By the way, interesting, speaking of the whole Oregon-Georgia battle for Curtis, you see where Oregon on the verge of changing its state law that would suggest that its NIL deals that, according to the House settlement, are supposed to be up for, scrutiny, and are they fair market value? Oregon wants to change state law to keep those NIL deals confidential. Therefore, you're essentially legalizing pay-for-play in Oregon. So a lot of these programs, I guess UGA included, willing to lean on the state legislator if it gives them the advantage. Oregon, perhaps an example of that here right now. Now, speaking of legal stuff and stuff like that, our friends at Merriweather and Tharp do bring today's show to you. And I know sometimes the legal talk is not fun, especially when it comes to the topic of divorce. But if you're going through divorce, you're not thinking about maybe fun right now. You're thinking about a resolution to your situation so you can have fun later, so you can be happier in the next season of your life, and your finances can be protected, your relationships, especially your children, that can be protected, that you can kind of return to a sense of normalcy and return to maybe some stability and some comfort with that maybe in short supply here right now. Merriweather and Tharp understands all of that full well. They have served people like you in situations like this thousands of times before, because one of the things they understand is, hey, this may not have been your choice. Sometimes divorce is something that's presented without much weigh-in from you, right? The other party makes that decision. And so if that's what you've kind of found yourself in right now, then the only thing you can do is sort of, play the ball where it lies, the cards that you've been dealt, and make the wisest decisions in the circumstances that you're currently in. And guidance on that, counsel on that, comes from our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. And they'll do this for you statewide right now. This is not just an Atlanta thing anymore. They have offices all across the state: Athens, Peachtree City, Carrollton, Savannah. These are lawyers in those communities entrenched within the communities, right? These are people kind of there, and they understand, how the court systems work in those particular, jurisdictions. And all of that expertise they want to give to you. It starts with a free initial consultation. It continues on with you throughout this process as long as it takes to get the resolution that you feel like you deserve. So I want you to find them online. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, we're busy today. NFL Scouting Combine continues. Before we're done, Malaki Starks had a chance to speak to reporters today. We'll hear a little bit from Malaki on the program, we hope. Mike Griffith also in Indianapolis. I don't think he's fighting with anybody at Starbucks. Maybe we'll find out that he was. But he'll also join us, kind of give us a little bit of an eyewitness account as the sort of workout portion of all of this kind of gets going. We'll talk to Mike and a little bit Terrence Edwards here in a second there as well. Prior to Terrence, though, let me go around the doghouse here for a moment. And, one thing we sort of see every year, at least in recent years, when it comes to the NFL Scouting Combine as a lead into the NFL Draft, is Georgia as a program kind of taking center stage with so many former Dogs on the verge of becoming draft picks and starting NFL careers for themselves, that the Georgia brand always seems to be more polished on the other side of one of these draft process, whether it be Pro Day or Scouting Combine leading into the draft. This year, no exception. In fact, maybe more true than ever, with the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles, using so many former Dogs to help get them there. And this week, we had a chance to hear from Eagles GM Howie Roseman again, asked directly about the presence of these former Georgia players on his roster and kind of what that meant for them. This is what Roseman said about that.
Incredibly detailed program. And obviously, they have a history of winning. When you look at it, when you add new players and you add this many new players from one place, they also know how to play off each other. They have a chemistry that normally you have to cultivate through your team and through years of practice, and so you get a head start. And then you're talking about really putting into place one of the greatest defenses in the history of college football. And they play with an edge. They play with a mentality, and Kirby does a phenomenal job.
Man, I just love every bit of that. I really do. Obviously, it's nice to hear the compliments, one of the great defenses of all time, but also when he kind of describes the sort of seamless cohesion within the program, I think there's a lot of value to that, too. I just think that's just exceptional stuff. I can't get enough of it. We've probably played every Roseman clip there is because, admittedly, that just sounds really good to my ears. And obviously, if you're a Georgia fan, the one thing you want to see is the sort of value that Roseman has seen in the Georgia program. You want to see that continue. And obviously, that's seemingly what Georgia is well set up to do. In fact, one of the guys who says that is Warren Brinson, the former Georgia defensive lineman who hung around at Georgia, got developed by Georgia. Now he's ready for the NFL. He sees plenty of opportunity for people to follow in his footsteps when it comes to stuff like that. This is Warren Brinson on that.
How did Georgia prepare me, man? Georgia prepared me just by just the physicality aspect of going through something so hard. Like, I came in with probably 14 guys at Georgia, and I think only 5 of us made it through. So that's the biggest thing. It's hard at Georgia. If you can last at Georgia, you can last anywhere. They build a culture of winning. They build a culture of men. And, I mean, it's really hard. And if you can make it through that, you can make it through anything. It's not a lot of stuff that can break me just because I made it through Georgia. I had a coach like Kirby Smart who always confronted and demanded excellence from everybody. And that's what you need in the NFL, somebody who doesn't get mad at hard coaching and having a hard culture around them. But Georgia prepared me for everything.
I'm going to try very carefully to sort of not get too high up on a soapbox here and not do this for too long. But I think what Brinson describes there and what Roseman says he notices, I think it's really important. And I think it's also part of the explanation for why college football is so popular. I think that people, society by and large, likes the idea of college football as a developmental vehicle. We like the idea in our society of like boys becoming men. There's always going to be a lot of culture around that, movie, songs, books, whatever else. The coming of age is always going to be a popular theme when it comes to stuff like that. The NFL doesn't have that. The NFL is very commoditized. You're taking someone who's already an adult, you're treating them like an adult, you don't really love them, you use them, and then you cast them aside. That's just kind of what the NFL is. Even the people in the NFL will tell you that. College football sort of always been something different, where you come into it as one thing and you leave something else. That's part of the popularity of college football because we value that as a society. We need our boys to become men. I was a boy, hopefully now I'm a man. Or all of us who are males, we were boys. Eventually, we try to become men. College football makes men. And Warren Brinson describes that well. And that's one of the reasons why we want to continue to see college football thrive. And the sort of practices and workouts and things like that Brinson says were instrumental for him in doing that, we don't want to see that stuff go away. So all these coaches who are cowering in the corner and afraid of spring practice and afraid of the transfer portal and afraid to coach, frankly, we think that's a disturbing trend. And the stuff that you're hearing from both Roseman and Brinson, I think, are a good explanation of why. And that is Around the Doghouse here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. So, as I told you, we are jam-packed. Malaki Starks later on is going to talk about some of the things that he was willing to do this year that, perhaps was a little bit of a different thing for him, kind of outside of his comfort zone, but helping Georgia in any way that he could. We'll hear about that. Also, Mike Griffith live from Indianapolis. We'll find out if he saw the fisticuffs at Starbucks. But for now, on everything else going on around Georgia, didn't get a chance to speak to him last week. Thrilled to be able to do that today. It's the great former Dawg, Terrence Edwards, here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Terrence Edwards. Great to have him part of the program. And Terrence, you are a coach. When you hear a guy like Warren Brinson say, seemingly really valuing the coaching process, the way that he was coached, the way he was developed, it sounds like Brinson likes the fact that it wasn't easy, because the truth is, if it was easy, then the number of guys waiting to get in the NFL would be as long as a Disney World ride. But as he said, listen, we had a bunch of guys come in with me. Only a few guys could hack it. Other guys went elsewhere. I became refined by that process. I mean, I'm not a coach. I'm just someone who spends a lot of time around football. I value that. As a coach yourself, I've got to imagine it means even more to you when a guy like Brinson speaks the way that he just did.
Yes, and I tell people all the time, football is the hardest team sport there is because you have 105 guys that's on a roster right now in college football that's working for a common goal. It's 11 on the field at one time that has to be in unison to be successful as an individual. And football is hard, and it's hard coaching. It's tough love, and players cannot take anything personal. It's nothing personal about hard coaching. It's building young men up to be successful on and off the field. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand about football is there's nothing personal about it. It's about just trying to build you and bring you to a team atmosphere, but we're also still playing for individual accolades.
And, when you see, and this is admittedly a hot topic for me, but when you see a lot of these coaches now who are willing to sort of sacrifice their spring practice as a way of keeping players out of the transfer portal, in my mind, Terrence, that's giving up your opportunity to influence them. That if you're a coach and you see value in yourself, and you better see value in yourself because some of these guys are getting paid $10 million a year, that when you say, I would rather not coach you during the spring so I don't run the risk of losing you in the portal. I mean, gosh, Terrence, I just think that's a sport moving in the wrong direction. You and I are of a similar age. You perhaps, I'm a little older than you are. You perhaps remember, Casey Jones when he was the coach of the Boston Celtics. I don't know if this was fair to Coach Jones or not, but they used to say, just kind of roll the ball out there, find good players, and, we'll go out there and win games. Like, I don't want college football to become a roll the ball out there sport where all it is just a bunch of, talented mercenaries, happen to be wearing the same uniform, and we'll let the talent go out there and decide the game. I mean, I think the role of coaching has made the sport better. I think the role of coaching has made the players better. And I don't want to see the opportunity for impact from these coaches going away. But as these spring practices and spring games dissolve, and that's kind of a growing trend around the sport, not at Georgia yet, thankfully, I think you run the risk of that where the influence that coaches can have, the kind of thing that Warren Brinson says he likes, the kind of thing that Howie Roseman says he recognized, there could just be less of that in college football if some of these guys get their way.
Yes, I think so as well. I think giving up spring football in the spring game is a knock on the fans first and foremost. I think the spring games around college football is basically meant for the fans to come out, enjoy and watching their team perform. And now fans get opportunity to see some players that haven't played much in the past, get opportunity to see them play. In this day and age, we have so many kids are going mid-year, high school kids. So now you get to see that kid perform now in a college setting. So I don't know, as a player, I don't know how I'm going to look at this. And I don't know, and I can't wait to see, and that data probably won't come for a few years, how the players react to this. Or is this even helping the transfer portal out as well? So I don't know. They don't know. I just think this, in my opinion, is a knee-jerk reaction because spring game is a part of college football.
I think that's exactly right. We've talked a lot this week about Jared Curtis, the five-star quarterback. And, I always say in the NFL, you have kind of two models, and they both seem to work pretty well. If you've got a truly great quarterback, paying him tons of money, and then maybe going a little cheaper around him because you trust him. This is Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs. That obviously can work really well if you've got the right quarterback. Conversely, if you're like the San Francisco 49ers, for instance, you got Brock Purdy, drafted very late, kind of prior to kind of cashing in big with the contract. Well, if you're not paying him very much money, you've got a lot of money to pay other players. We would say that Ohio State probably did some of that last year. Will Howard, if you pay attention to these like NIL rankings and things like that, his overall value wasn't as high as some of the other quarterbacks he was competing with. And if Ohio State was paying him, let's say $1 million, something like that, there was way more money going to other players. I guess my question for you, Terrence, is this is not always an easy thing to answer, but how important do you think the college football version of the franchise quarterback is? Do you still want the best quarterback you can get, even if it's going to cost you all kinds of dollars? Or because these guys are getting very, very expensive, is it better to spread that money around your roster?
I think first and foremost, if there's a guy that you believe in, it's just like the NFL draft. If there's a quarterback at the top of the first round that you truly believe in, I've always thought there's not too much to get it. If you have to just pay over the amount to get that guy that you believe is a franchise quarterback, then you go get it. And I think in any level of football, if you don't have a quarterback, you won't win. So going out, getting a franchise quarterback can help. But it's also a lot of other things that has to happen around that quarterback for that quarterback to be successful. The offensive line play has to be up to par. The running back play has to be up to par. The receiver play has to be up to par for that quarterback to even be successful. And then we can look on the other hand and look at who's the greatest quarterback in Georgia history, in my opinion, Stetson Bennett, who's a former walk-on.
Yeah.
But I just think everything lined up perfectly for Stetson. He had Brock, he had Ladd, he had a great defense. He had a lot of things in his favor for him to turn out to be what he was and helping us win 2 national championships. So everything has to align, but I believe if there's a quarterback that any franchise or organization believes in, you have to go get him. Does it always work out? No, but then there's times where it does work out. So we can only know when it work out is when that quarterback career is over.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. One of the things I like about this time of year is there's some kind of like now it can be told stuff that comes out where guys will reference things that maybe happened back during the season that we didn't have absolute confirmation of at the time. An example that, Quinn Ewers has revealed that he dealt with an oblique injury for almost the entire year, and maybe some of what at times looked like struggles for him were perhaps impacted because of injury. Mikael Williams had his own example of that yesterday. We heard this on the show, letting it be known that, he played most of the year at no better than like, say, 50 or 60% of, full health. And I think we have a sense that was probably true. Most of us, I think, kind of had an intuition about that, if not, rumblings and grumblings behind the scene. But my question for you is this, as someone who's, been a player and obviously worked, closely with the players right now, how much of this kind of thing goes on to sort of tell the story of a season of players who just end up kind of playing the whole year less than fully healthy? Now, everybody's always going to be banged up a little bit. We understand that. But there's also something of, no, I was actually playing hurt through the year. Seems like Georgia had a lot of that with its offensive line. Williams' overall stat line maybe not as good as it could have been because of the fact that he wasn't able to be a full go. I mentioned for a different program, somebody like Ewers at Texas. The idea of the player who's more than banged up, who's more than just hurting, but he's actually injured, but he's not so injured he can't play. He's just injured enough not to be fully effective. How much of that ends up being kind of behind the scenes a really big part of what a football season's all about?
A very big part. There's a lot of times that the fans, the media, does not know what's going on with the player. And most teams are not going to give you the full report of that player. Like Mikael said that he was playing this year, probably about 60%. I think we all kind of assumed that with him missing several weeks and just not the explosive athlete that we was accustomed to him be. So I kind of assumed that ankle was not 100% throughout the year. But one thing that I do love about some of the great football players is we're going to go out there and lay it on the line. We don't care about our body at times, which now as an older player, that's kind of crazy to me, but we love this game so much. I mean, there's a lot of times where I played games and I probably shouldn't have, but that's just what the sport we chose, and we love this game so much, and we love our teammates, and we love winning, and so we're going to go out there and just give it our best no matter what. And so this is across the board. This is just not a Georgia thing, not a Texas thing. This is an all levels thing where players are playing probably 30-40% of their maximum, but they have to go out and compete with their teammates.
So this won't be an easy question for you to answer because you're a competitive and you're a competitor and you want to be the guy on the field. But if you're out there playing hurt enough that it would be a reasonable consideration that you would not play, how much do you think your own performance was diminished when you were hurt? Now, you don't want to give that spot up to somebody else, but if you're kind of getting outside your body and judging your performance, if you're truly playing hurt, do you feel like you were still effective, or looking back on it, is there a moment when you said, maybe I would have just been better off on the sideline in this particular game?
Yeah, in the moment, we're such competitors. We're such believers in ourselves that me at 50% is still better than the next person at 100%. But if you look at it in hindsight, it's probably best that you didn't play. And I think with Michael this year, you saw a lot of times where he was only in on pass rush situations. So they had other guys playing probably on first and second down, and he came in on third down because that's what he does. He's a pass rush specialist. So you can modify your game. You can modify the game plan specifically for that player and understand his limitations. But there's a lot of times where we will not take ourselves out the game. That's why you have Ron Carson and everyone else to try to police us, because we're not going to police ourselves.
Let me finish with this real quick. For whatever reason, there's a ton of buzz right now around Arian Smith. Had a really good performance at the Senior Bowl. Kind of expected to be, one of the guys that may run, one of the faster times in the 40-yard dash, the NFL Combine. You know what it's like, Terrence, to sort of transition from a college career to a professional career. How much are you rooting for Arian this week and the other Dogs? Going to be trying to do some of the same kind of stuff here, but this former Georgia wide receiver seems to really have a spotlight on himself right now. How exciting is that for you?
Oh, very exciting. Just to know the young man personally and know what the struggles that he had this year and how DawgNation really treated him this season. I'm just happy that he's getting that opportunity. And one thing that Arian has done is he's been able to play special teams throughout his whole career as a gunner. So that is going to help him along the way. And I can see him getting drafted and being a fifth receiver on a team and being able to use his speed on special teams, being able to come in and help teams with his downfield speed. And I can see him having a productive NFL career. I know a lot of people will be like, you're crazy, but you just never know when that light comes on and that switch is flipped. Be like, just look at Terrell Davis. I just want to just think of him. He didn't have the greatest college career with being hurt all the time. And I don't think anyone foreseen him becoming a Hall of Famer. So you just never know. You just get in the right situation, a team to believe in you, and a little luck. And you never know what your career would turn out to be.
Well, Terrence, I appreciate your insight. Always so valuable. Obviously, bubble work still ongoing. That next generation of pass catchers getting some good training from you guys. Where can people find out more about the stuff that you're doing?
Yes, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, thanks for your time. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Good stuff there.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, good stuff there. Terrence Edwards, love the great former Georgia wide receiver. And, of course, we got more great guests here coming up. Mike Griffith live from Indianapolis, the NFL Scouting Combine in a matter of moments. Prior to that, though, let's go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And speaking of Mike Griffith, a big part of our DawgNation cruise coming up in April. You can take a lot of Royal Caribbean cruise vacations, but only the DawgNation cruise gives you a chance to really connect with, DawgNation people. Me, Mike, Jeff Tell, so many of our Kaylee Manziel be there. So many of our great DawgNation folks. Cody Chafin's going to be there this year too. So many of our great DawgNation folks on hand for that. It's an awesome time, and we're excited about it. In fact, we've had all kinds of cool planning and things like that about what's going to make this year's DawgNation cruise even better. And I love our partnership with the Royal Caribbean. I've told you before, I take a little bit of personal pride in the fact that I think right now Royal Caribbean's about the hottest brand out there because of all the new things they've been introducing at a time in which people are just really hungry to travel. People want to get away. People have grown to appreciate the value of experiences, and the experience you get on board a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation is unlike any other. In fact, if you're watching a video, we see some beautiful shots there of Allure of the Seas. Allure of the Seas was the Oasis-class ship that we were on last year for our DawgNation cruise. And did you know that Allure has just recently gone through an amplification, so it's already a wonderful ship. They've now done great things to amplify that ship and make it even better. This is what Royal Caribbean's always doing. Amplifying ships, introducing brand new ships. Of course, this summer, we're excited about the debut of Star of the Seas, the newest in the Icon class of ships that's going to be sailing out of Port Canaveral. Legend of the Seas coming up shortly after that. Another in the Icon class. The great Royal Beach Club at Paradise Island, the Bahamas. So many fun things on their way for Royal Caribbean. So Jessica Slater's a wonderful travel agent. She doesn't work for Royal Caribbean, but she does work with them. And she can make your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation better than it would otherwise be. So give her a call. 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also find her online by emailing her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Okay, let's talk about a couple stories here for a moment. Then after that, Mike live from Indianapolis. Malaki Starks still coming up on the show today, too. Interesting hire coming out of the SEC yesterday where Jim Nagy, speaking of Mike, that's Mike's buddy from the Senior Bowl, led that thing down in Mobile for a long time. He's now been named as general manager for the Oklahoma Sooners. Two things for me on this. Thing number one is, and I don't take pleasure in saying this, I'm just being honest, is I think this is the sort of move you make as a program when you think your coach may be a short-term proposition. Of all the coaches in the SEC, probably fair to put Venables on the hottest seat of all. This is a guy who's maybe only hanging on there by a fingernail. So we've seen some hires around Norman this offseason that are putting some structure in place around the program that might last past Venables' tenure, especially if it comes to a close here this year. Nagy is certainly an example of that. He is a talent evaluator. That's been kind of his profession even prior to leading the Senior Bowl. Beyond that, though, I do think we're still kind of trying to figure out what the proper template for a college football GM is supposed to be. As I said before, in my mind, Nagy's expertise would be in the talent evaluator world. But most coaches are already pretty good at talent evaluators. I think what we're really looking for in our sport overall, and this is the kind of not fun part, but who are the best bean counters going to be? I mean, in a world in which every team in the SEC has its revenue sharing payments to dole out, and you've got some NIL on top of that, at a certain point, you've got the money you have, whether you're Texas and it's unlimited, theoretically, or somebody else and there's maybe some sort of limit to it. Eventually, you've got the money that you've got to spend. How do you choose to spend that money? And the best way to have the most money to play the best players is to find out where you can go cheap. And that's kind of going beyond the talent evaluation part of this. That's a little bit more of a business, non-football mind that, coaches love the guys that they know. They like their known commodities. And over the course of the last couple of years, if we're being honest, across college football, we have probably seen the solid starter, not superstar, the solid starter, veteran player. We have probably seen that guy be paid more money than he will be paid going forward. I don't take pleasure in saying that because as far as I'm concerned, they should all get as much money as they can. But the sort of good player, solid starter, but not a future first-round pick, in the early, pretty inefficient days of the NIL space, some of those guys have probably been paid more money than they're going to get paid in the future because the best way to have the money to pay the five-star quarterback, for instance, or the elite wide receiver or the whatever else is to find a way to say, if I can get 80% of this guy's production from another player who I can only have to pay half as much money to, that's the sort of efficient money management that's going to have to exist. It exists in the NFL. That's going to have to exist in college football, we believe, going forward. And so the sort of template of the GM that can kind of make those tough money decisions, in many cases being the bad cops, the head coach doesn't have to, that may be the next phase of all of this. Like typically happens, I had more stories I wanted to get to. We'll save these and kind of get to them perhaps tomorrow on the show. For now, let's make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. NFL scouting combine ongoing right now. We'll hear from Malaki Starks before we're done with today's show. But for now, to hear everything that is happening there in Indianapolis, a destination that's been good for Georgia before Lucas Oil Stadium. Let's talk to Mike Griffith here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Mike, we joked earlier about a couple of media types getting into a squabble and a fight at Starbucks there in Indianapolis. I trust that you've not thrown any punches at a or accosted anybody at a Starbucks here this week so far?
Nah, pretty calm week for me so far, Brandon. Just looking at all the Georgia players that are here, I think we've had 7 guys that have kind of gone through the front end of it. We're going to get to see some workouts on the field today, although Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams both saying they're going to go a little bit later. But I do think you'll see some Warren Brinson action out there and maybe some Ty Ingram Dawkins.
Of the Georgia players that you've heard from thus far, and you mentioned some of those names, we played audio from Mykel and Jalen yesterday. We're going to hear from Malaki Starks in a moment. We heard some stuff from Warren Brinson a little earlier. Of what you've heard thus far, kind of in the pre-workout portion of this event, just sort of the talking part of it here to this point, what has stood out to you so far?
I thought Mykel came here, with a lot of personality. I think he understands he's got to promote himself a little bit more. And, just in general, Brandon, when they're back at Georgia, it's really all about the team, and everybody kind of stays within the boundaries, within the lines of that team concept. But when you get here, it's a little bit more about promoting yourself, right? Like Malaki Starks letting on that, oh, yeah, I beat Brock Bowers in more reps than he beat me. This is a time for him to brag on that. That is going to add some draft stock. There's going to be NFL teams that are going to ask him about that. Part of the allure for Georgia players isn't just what we see on Saturdays, but what they're able to do every day in practice against other future NFL pros or guys that are in the league right now. And sometimes those guys in the league right now will tell their coaches or GMs, hey, I went up against Malaki Starks. This guy's really good. Or I went up against Mykel Williams or Jalen Walker. So there's a lot of that kind of self-scout going on. I think Georgia players have a big advantage in that they're able to talk to their former teammates and have an idea of what to expect once they get here as far as the interviews, the process, how to pace themselves, and obviously, the medical evaluation. That's one of those things we don't really know a lot about, happens behind closed doors, but it's just as important as anything else that takes place at the NFL Combine.
Talked yesterday about Williams a little bit in that, listen, I don't blame him for being injured. I think he deserves a lot of credit for fighting through that injury to be on the field as much as he was. He said yesterday he was no better than 60% healthy this year for UGA. And when you see the kind of, in many ways, sort of prototypical defensive end, edge rushing type that I think he's about to be, very attractive NFL draft scouts, long arms, good bit of speed coming off the edge. Not a guy that you have to take off the field, though, for run stop either, I don't think. This is a pretty valuable prospect, obviously. I think we saw very good from Mykel Williams at Georgia. I don't know that we saw the absolute best of what he could be. We may see that at the NFL level. Think about Georgia the last couple of years. I think it was a good defense this year. Not great by Georgia standards. 2023, probably the same type of deal here. A fully healthy Williams. He's second team All-SEC in both those years. So good career. He's freshman All-American in his first year. So good career. Gave Georgia a lot. But when you talk about the overall ceiling that he may put on display for the NFL, if he could have been a little bit healthier, boy, I think you're talking about a defense that the last couple of seasons could have taken on a completely different complexion. Do you agree?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, he's a train wrecker, right? And we saw that against Texas. That was the first week that he practiced after injuring the ankle against Clemson. And, yeah, he did. He said he was less than 70% most of the year, and now he's healthy. He gave that ankle a couple extra weeks to rest after the season. That's why he's not working out at the Combine. He wants to be 100. I think right now Pro Day tentatively set for March 12th back in Athens. That's going to be a big day. You're going to see a lot of talent on display, as well as a lot of NFL teams. But, I would agree, that Mykel Williams is a guy that had we seen him at 100%, he would have put up, astronomical numbers. And that's the question for the NFL teams, Brandon. I mean, if you've got a choice between Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams, maybe Mykel has the higher ceiling, but Jalen is so versatile. Who do you go with first? And I'm hearing right now, Jalen Walker, the odds-on favorite to be the first dog off the board, or maybe it'll be Williams. Malaki, maybe mid-first round to late first round, depending on how he tests. I think tomorrow is going to be really important for him. Jared Wilson, another guy. Will he be the first center off the board? Will he be the second? That can make the difference in a round or two. ETN, there's like 40 running backs here. Did ETN make a colossal mistake? Is he a fourth or a fifth round pick? if he doesn't go in the second day, in the second or third round, he's going to check his bank account and say, wow, I could have made more money coming back to Georgia for another, $500,000-$600,000 I think they were paying him. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out at the Combine. I mean, certainly Georgia's been a big part of the story here. I've been traveling around talking to different players from different teams about the Georgia Bulldogs, getting some insights. Yes, Malaki Moore told me Alabama does look at Georgia as a rival now. I've always kind of wondered on that end how they viewed it. We know Georgia, views Alabama as one of those teams, and of course they'll play again this year, this time between the hedges.
I want to ask you more about that part of it in a moment, but you mentioned Jalen Walker. So if I'm an NFL GM, look, those are good jobs. There's only 32 of them. I guess if you subtract Dallas from that, there's 31. There's just not a lot of people who get to be the key decision maker for an NFL team. And so if I'm lucky enough to get one of those jobs, I want to do as little as I can to lose that job. That means I want to draft safe players. And I can still remember, it seems like it was just yesterday, when Jalen Walker was coming out of high school, he just seemed like such a bulletproof prospect. Sharp kid, very good player. Obviously, the versatility is the thing you think about. As an NFL GM now, I still sort of look at Walker the same way, that every year there are probably a couple of guys that this guy is just not getting you fired. This guy's not going to do anything stupid. This guy's not going to be a bad player. This guy is just safe. Is there a player with a higher ceiling than him in this draft? Perhaps that's the case. Is Jalen Walker almost certainly going to be a guy that you're penciling in as a starter somewhere for a good period of time? And is he going to, sort of have a good image projected onto your organization while he's there? Seems like that's the case. If I'm a GM, guys like Jalen Walker are the ones that I love, because I know Jalen Walker ain't getting me fired anytime soon.
No, that's true. And, you mentioned that position versatility. And like you, it just seems like yesterday he was telling us about playing a hybrid role. What does that even mean? I mean, he wasn't starting, but, we'd see him play not this past season, but the season before. And then you watch him develop into a Butkus Award winner seemingly overnight and a top 10 draft pick. And, that's what still happens at Georgia. That's the draw to playing for a Kirby Smart defense or playing under Glenn Schumann, is that you're going to have opportunities to develop your skills, play different positions. And maybe the stats don't show it. I know, sometimes you and I have talked about sack numbers and how it relates to Havoc. And maybe Georgia doesn't have the sack numbers, but Kirby still claims Havoc. The NFL types know. Trayvon Walker is probably still the best example. I mean, here's a guy that wasn't even first-team All-SEC. He was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So a lot of times what the NFL is looking for kind of goes beyond the numbers and inside the scheme. And to your point, with the character, the ability that these guys have to grasp new systems, their football IQ. We know the Georgia defense is a little bit more on the complex side. So these guys come out of Georgia, they're NFL ready. And then, as you said, you do the deep dive into the character and you say, wow, where could you possibly go wrong with Jalen Walker? There does not seem to be a downside to him as a top 10 pick.
All right, let me finish with this. You mentioned kind of the vibe around the event as it relates to Georgia. I think back to a couple of years ago when obviously the 5 former Dogs were on their way to being first-round picks. Everywhere you turned, TV, things like that, it was all Georgia talk all the time. This is a year in which there's probably less, first-round picks projected. I believe that Georgia has a strong chance of getting 3. But there are a good number of Georgia players kind of, in 14, I guess, total invitations going out here. How much of a Georgia vibe does exist around this event right now compared to recent seasons when Georgia also had a large contingent of former players there?
I mean, I'd say the same amount. I mean, you got 14 guys here. That's the same amount that you had after the 2021 season, albeit, like you pointed out, I don't think there's 5 first-round picks. There's only 3 first-round picks. I mean, we've been kind of spoiled here, no doubt, BA. But I think a lot of the talk's about Kirby Smart. That's what resonates. I mean, obviously, Georgia had a very good season. They won the SEC championship. No one takes that lightly. The Philly Dogs, they're talked about quite a bit. Jalen Carter now establishing himself, I think, the best defensive tackle in the league. You're hearing some questions about him when he was in college, and people trying to find out a little bit more about Brock Bowers when he was at Georgia. What was he like? So the Georgia brand is still strong. Maybe not as much about next season, but that's really not what this event's about. We've asked a little bit about some of the players coming up at Georgia, and of course I'll have a story on DawgNation.com on that, on who some of these young guys are that these players are identifying as stars of the future. I did have a chance to talk to Notre Dame safety Xavier Watts about Gunnar Stockton and the Georgia offense, and he was telling me they were very impressed with Gunnar Stockton and his mobility as well. So, that was only a one-game test tube for Gunnar, but I thought it was interesting to hear what the Notre Dame safeties had to say about the game plan and about the respect they had for Gunnar's really dual threat abilities, because, it really wasn't on display, but a lot of that had to do with the way Notre Dame defended it. So to me, that was insightful to hear the opposing Notre Dame player talk about what the Georgia offense looked like with Gunnar Stockton, because we really haven't done a deep dive on it. It was one game, and boom, the season was over. Of course, we'll have a whole off season of coverage coming up on DawgNation. Of course, you'll be talking about it every day at DawgNation Daily. But spring football not that far away, Brandon.
For sure, that's the case. So, Mike, will continue to enjoy what's taking place there with you and Kaylee in Indianapolis. And we'll see you back here as spring practice approaches on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, very soon as well. Good
Appreciate
stuff,
it, Brandon.
Yeah, good stuff there from Mike Griffith. And, of course, earlier today at the NFL Scouting Combine, I had a chance to hear from Georgia defensive back, former Dawg Malaki Starks. Starks a safety, probably that position in the NFL, but this year at times sharing with Janelle Aguero a little bit that star position for Georgia, kind of making that transition when UGA needed that. We talked position versatility the other day as it relates to Jalen Walker. Well, Starks also kind of found himself in a couple of different spots during the season. How does that translate for him moving on to the NFL? Malaki had a chance to talk about that earlier this morning.
You could look at it like that. I think I took a different role this year, just being able to be in a position to go play in the slot, maybe shut down the side of the field that they don't go to, so the players go to the other side or whatever the case may be. But I think, the thing about Georgia, you're not playing by yourself. There's so many playmakers on the field, and the job is to get it done as a group, so it doesn't matter who makes the play as long as it gets made. Football's just kind of been my outlet, since I was a kid. It's just where I go is who I am. It's my space to be myself. I just love it. I compete. I love the game of football.
Yeah, great leader. Obviously a terrific Georgia career. And golly, I feel like a broken record, but I remember his commitment ceremony. I know that Cody and Jeff talked about this last night before the hedges too. His commitment ceremony, like it was yesterday, the interception against Oregon at the beginning of the 2022 season, that seems like it was 5 minutes ago. That was his first ever college game. Now his college career's come to an end. Gosh, man, these things are just a blur. A blink of an eye and a career happens right before your eyes. Starks now on his way to the NFL. We obviously wish him well as he does that. In fact, we'll toast him with a Finish Long drink. Before we say goodbye to you today, let's remind you of that as you're getting ready for, spring is basically here. Now, I'm sure it'll be cold again at some point in time, but people are back out on golf courses again, backyard patios, all kinds of exciting things going on. And y'all know this, when it's the sort of being outside time of year, I love the Finish Long drink for anything like that. If I'm sneaking off to a golf course or if I'm hanging out with friends or just really anything you're doing this time of year, a Finish Long drink goes great with it. Whether it's the traditional, the blue can, that's probably my favorite. That's the traditional citrus. It's the grapefruit flavor. It's the gin kick. Or for a limited time here in the Peach State, the peach-flavored version, Long Drink Zero. That's no carbs, no sugar. Long Drink Strong. That's a cool option as well. The cranberry has always been a very popular option. I know my wife loves that. So drinks that a lot of Georgia tailgates, things like that. Just always a great opportunity, especially we head towards the spring, to enjoy ourselves some Finish Long drink. It's a special, I think, kind of fun category of beverage. If you like mixed drinks, this is a mixed drink that you don't have to mix yourself. When we first started talking about Finish Long drink years ago, we had to sort of explain that beverage category to people. Well, now everybody sort of understands it. They know what that's all about. And if they're smart, they also know that when it comes to delicious flavor, the Finish Long drink dominates that category from that standpoint. So find out more online, including the story of how it kind of gets to America, how you can enjoy the great flavor for yourself, pick some up close by you, all online at thelongdrink.com. Golden Shoe going out today. Our buddy Georgia on tap, always sending great stuff to us. This is from a few days ago. I told y'all, when I'm away, I'm a little bit inactive on social media, a little bit, so I'm trying to play catch up here a little bit. So story several days ago, Paul Feinbaum, of according to On3, predicting that Carson Beck and Miami is going to thrive and Georgia's going to take a step back. That was the story. Georgia on tap upon seeing that said, BA, there you have it again. Once again, in honor of the great Nolan Smith, Georgia going 7-5. Georgia on tap wondering also what Paul Feinbaum thought about Stetson Bennett. Obviously an allusion to the fact that folks like that have been wrong before. Hashtag bulletin board material. Perhaps that's the case. Certainly worthy of a golden shoe here today. Georgia on tap, we will give you that. Lousy stinking Gators will give you nothing but another beatdown coming up later on this fall. How about that Gator hater updater? How about 1,573 days? That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia, and that's a great way to close things out here today. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. Obviously, we started thinking about spring, getting cooled down with our friends from R.S. Andrews. Certainly an example of that. I had to flip on the air conditioning yesterday. I don't like that time of year. I'm typically hot-natured. But I don't like that time of year where it's like 70 during the day and 40 during the night. I sort of feel like it's a lot of work with the thermostat, and I don't always do it well. I don't want it to be hot while I sleep, though. I'll tell you that. All right, so let's dive in here and get some comments. Garrison Tucker talking about quarterbacks says I'm not looking forward to watching how good DJ Lagway is. He also said I don't think that Arch Manning is remotely close to what he's claimed to be capable of. As I've said before about Arch, I do put some stock in the fact that last spring, Arch Manning got a lot of positive buzz coming from Texas. That I think the behind-the-scenes people, and, listen, sometimes this stuff ends up not being true, but I think the behind-the-scenes people have spoken pretty favorably of him. That there is, I believe, sort of a natural skepticism that exists sometimes when famous last name, who perhaps came from a high school that wasn't always playing the stiffest competition. Probably fair to wonder, well, how good is this guy really? And we didn't see much of him this season. Did not overtake Quinn Ewers, despite the fact that Ewers, maybe hampered by the oblique injury, but either way, did not have a great season. I think there was – I think that Sarkisian was intending to be careful of how he handled that. I certainly can't promise you that Manning is going to be the best quarterback in the country. He's definitely going to be the most famous. I can't promise you that he's going to be the best, but I have a pretty strong suspicion that he's probably going to be pretty good. I think that, the idea that, he's a bust and he's going to fall flat and all of this is sort of a media creation. There are media creations. I don't get the sense that Manning is one, but we'll obviously get a chance to see that. As far as DJ Lagway goes, listen, Lagway is a terrific prospect. There's no doubt about that. We're Gator haters. We make a whole cottage industry out of, making fun of the lousy, stinking Gators, but we're not liars. And every sense that we get is that Lagway is probably a really good quarterback prospect. The concern for Florida, and this is coming from their own fans, they're a little concerned about their coaching situation. Not just the fact that Napier is a coach in the hot seat, but the fact that Napier, and we talked about this in the show earlier this week, that Napier was a play-calling head coach. Now, first of all, we haven't seen a play-calling head coach win a national championship since Jimbo Fisher in 2013. We may see, whether it's on the record stated as this or not, we may see Ryan Day try to give that a go again for the Buckeyes this year with what's-his-face stepping into the offensive coordinator role, Brian Hartline. But we, play-calling head coach is not always a great recipe for championship success. But beyond that, a lot of Florida fans were very unhappy with that specific aspect of, Napier's coaching performance, just not loving the play calling, something that Georgia fans themselves have obviously not been immune to. And now you got Russ Callaway that's been promoted to offensive coordinator, but Callaway is not going to be the play caller. He's going to be leading the meetings and taking charge of the game planning, but all of that's window dressing. Napier is still going to be the guy calling the plays. And a lot of people in Gainesville would tell you they thought that the condition for Napier's return was that he was going to give over that power to somebody else. But apparently he is not. So what does that mean? It means that you've got a quarterback prospect in Lagway who probably is, as Garrison alludes to, really pretty impressive. but it is a coaching situation. That's a little bit of a tricky scene. Garrison also asked, well, who's better this year, Lagway or Sellers? Here's the thing we have not talked enough about as it relates to Lenore Sellers. Speaking of coaching situation, South Carolina brought in Mike Shula to be their offensive coordinator. Now, Shula is a little bit of a punchline in the eyes of some SEC fans because he was a failed Alabama head coach. But like a lot of people, the respect level that Shula has as an assistant and the respect level that Shula has as a head coach are very different things. Shula was obviously kind of a disaster going back many years ago as the Alabama head coach. Another example of sort of the famous last name who wasn't quite what he was supposed to be. But a lot of people will tell you, and NFL people in particular, that Shula is really good as a kind of a quarterback whisper assistant coach. In fact, a guy that has been given a lot of credit for the success that Cam Newton had at Carolina. Newton was an MVP, and Cam will tell you that's more important than winning a Super Bowl. And I think that Shula got some of the credit for the success that Newton had there at the Carolina Panthers. So if we're going to use the coaching theme here, Sellers and Lagway, both pretty good prospects. I think a lot of people who kind of get a little deeper into this stuff will tell you that Sellers may be better set up with Shula as offensive coordinator than Lagway is, still kind of working with Billy Napier. And, by the way, whether fair or not, Shula at South Carolina, I believe, is going to be viewed as an upgrade over the guy they had previously, Dowell Loggins, I think at least in the eyes of some. UGA Marine says, as a Georgia fan, I love Billy Napier. Give him a 50-year extension. I think a lot of folks probably agree with that. A lot of folks agree with that indeed. Let's see what else. Randy Hall asking a disparaging question about Eddie. I'll have you know that is not the case. $1 million Eddie here is feeling like $1 million today, but not on any kind of nefarious lists. Baruch Dog says that Stetson Bennett was not Georgia's best quarterback. He was just the quarterback for 2 national titles. That's like saying Buck Bellew was our second best quarterback. But Stetson was a Heisman finalist. So, I do think, to me, this is a tough question to answer because it sort of depends on the criteria that you're looking at. In other words, if you had one quarterback for one game, of all the quarterbacks in Georgia history, is Bennett the guy that you would select? Maybe he is because of his moxie near the end of games. Maybe he would be your selection. Or maybe just the more prototypical looking Stafford, maybe that'd be your guy. I always say, when you think about the era in which he played and how well those stats still hold up, the most underrated quarterback in Georgia history is Eric Zier. That it was a revelation for Georgia to have a quarterback like Zier at the time that he existed. And even after all these years later, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but even after all of these years, the Zier numbers, man, they still hold up really, really well at a time in which college football was not throwing the ball all over the yard the way that it currently is. Zier was a really, really good player. I'm not saying that makes him the best quarterback in UGA history. I'm just saying in the conversation of Georgia quarterbacks, I think he's still probably underrated. But in the case of Bennett, he was more than just, a guy who happened to be here. Bennett had massive fourth quarters for Georgia, massive second halves for Georgia oftentimes that allowed them to win these games. So I do believe that while, Bennett was kind of an ensemble cast, good on offense, good on defense, and certainly benefiting from, talent around him. But Bennett's fingerprints are also more on those championship trophies than maybe some other quarterbacks of the past would have been because of the big throws that he made. Garrison Tucker says, what are your thoughts on the Braves bullpen this year? I think overall, I've said this before, I think, if you look at some of the projections for for the Braves, somewhere like the low 90s, 91 wins, something like that. I'm probably an under on that. I hope I'm not right. And I guess in a roundabout way, you can be wrong. I could be right about that. And still, the Braves could have postseason success because the postseason has become a little bit of a crapshoot. But I'm a little suspicious of the Braves right now. I think they're going to have to really lean on their starting pitching. And their starting pitching should still be outstanding. They're going to have to really lean on their starting pitching. On Facebook, Ronnie White reminding us that Bennett had 4 offensive MVPs. Yeah, MVP of the Orange Bowl, MVP of the national championship. Was he the MVP of both the Peach Bowl and the 2022 national championship game? I guess they'd call it the 2023 national championship game. Was he the MVP of all 4 of those games? I mean, that's a pretty big statement for his career. I mean, also a Heisman finalist. I mean, given the fact that Georgia hadn't had one pre-1992 and hadn't had one, before that, 1982, that's a pretty big accomplishment in its own right. Little cola talk in here. Y'all know which cola I like the best. Johnny Prescott mentioning the Dr. Pepper Blackberry as a mixer. So I don't think that's why Dr. Pepper necessarily wants their product marketed, I don't think. But I have heard from several people. Creamy coconut back in the summer, blackberry now. Dr. Pepper has pretty, a long track record of being a pretty good mixer, especially these flavored versions. Now, I had people back in the summer saying, well, I love that Dr. Pepper creamy coconut mixed with, rum or whatever you want to mix that with. There were a lot of people saying that. I don't know that's a part of Dr. Pepper's official marketing strategy, marketing campaign, but I did have several people say they really like that as a mixer. Now, there was a time in my life, very, very long time ago, I try to be temperate with my, enjoyments on all fronts these days. But when I was a little less temperate, if I was going to have a beverage, I would mix it with Dr. Pepper, something brown with Dr. Pepper. I used to love that. I wouldn't mix alcohol with like soda now to save my life. That's a headache waiting to happen as far as I'm concerned. But there was a time when I did enjoy, Dr. Pepper as a mixer for sure. Johnny Prescott. Don't let me draw you off sides, Johnny. Don't let me draw you off sides. Let's see what else. Yeah, also on DawgNation.com, the subject of Gene Hackman comes up. First of all time great actor. Unbelievable. I mean, I'm like a lot of people. I love Hoosiers. You love French Connection. You love a lot of that kind of stuff. I was joking with somebody this morning that even though it's sort of off-brand for me, Crimson Tide is an awesome movie. They do reference, Roll Tide in the movie, so I can't officially endorse it, but it's a great movie. Hackman's just a terrific actor. You could go on and on about, great roles for him, of course. But at the age of 95, it's certainly going to appear to be an accidental death that kills him. And I'm not a forensic expert, so, don't take this with a... But when you have him, his significant other, and I believe a dog that also, died altogether, I mean, that certainly comes across as like a carbon monoxide. I mean, once again, I don't know what I'm talking about, so please don't take this as reporting. But certainly the first thing that comes to my mind on that is some sort of accidental death, gas leak, something like that, if that's what it ends up being. It's just really weird that a guy that was, I believe, 95 years old ends up dying because of an accidental death, which I believe we may end up hearing that it is. So, once again, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Those are not facts, just the suspicion that I get. Let's see what else. Jerry Dog Fan and others mentioning Eric Zier. Foster Moss mentions Grayson Lambert. Listen, for a single game, I mean, Georgia's kind of, and I guess a lot of programs probably like this. We just know more about it for Georgia. But some of the single game performances we've seen from guys who otherwise didn't have that kind of career are pretty wild. Grayson Lambert against South Carolina. Y'all remember Joe Cox against Arkansas? I don't know how many quarterbacks in the history of college football have had better single games than what like Cox had against Arkansas that one night. And I'll tell you this, very early days of DawgNation, this is like first couple of weeks of the show. People got really mad at me because I had said about Grayson Lambert, I said, let's just be careful here. Lambert has a great game against South Carolina, but keep in mind, Joe Cox once National Player of the Week against Arkansas. They didn't quite turn into a great season for him, so let's not put too much on Grayson Lambert. People got so mad. Oh, my gosh. People got so mad, which is, in retrospect, sort of a funny thing to think people are mad about, saying that. So our buddy Danny letting us know Eric Zier still 7th all-time in the SEC when it comes to passing yardage. That's remarkable. He played 91, 92, 93, 94. That's a very different version of the SEC. And yet those passing numbers still 7th best all time. Now, some of that was also, this was not a very complete, 92 was a really good Georgia team. That team, had there been a 12-team playoff, 92 Georgia could have played with anybody. Maybe they wouldn't have won the national championship. They could have played with anybody. 93, 94, not great teams. So some of that was just they had to throw. They didn't know the choice. But Eric Zier, a very underrated quarterback. Very underrated. Let's see what else. Stick D's pointing out when you think about the best passing percentage of all time, that belongs to Drew Bobo, which is, I believe, true. Very funny. I guess Kenny McIntosh is right there with him too, right? Jonathan Aaron also mentioning, I guess the McAfee show says the Steelers could be in play for Matthew Stafford. Perhaps that's the case. Jerry Dog fan shouting out Jeff's story on Jay Lamar. We'll look forward to talking to Jeff about that tomorrow. That's good stuff. JC mentioning Joe Tarasinski III. So I have vivid memories of the 2005 Georgia-Florida game. Vivid memories of that. And it's funny, like I loved DJ Shockley. Really enjoyed cheering for DJ. Thought DJ was a terrific player. And that day, Georgia without Shockley and Kedrick Golston against a Florida team that wasn't great. And Georgia comes into the game undefeated. This is undefeated Georgia playing against Florida, but minus your best offensive and, arguably your best defensive player. What a heartbreaker that was. But I do also remember, this is back during the age in which, and I know What's-His-Face did a song kind of about this. This is back during the age when, like, the time before the Georgia-Florida game for Georgia fans was so much fun. Like, just Mardi Gras times, Las Vegas times Cancun times everything. Like, it was just unbelievable fun prior to the game and sheer misery after the game. Just kind of, this is sort of back during that era. I remember being at, like, Brogan's in St. Simons the night before the Georgia-Florida game in 2005. Georgia fans had talked themselves into Joe Tarasinski. You had, people just walking around with signs, Tarasinski for Heisman. It's just kind of funny how there was a huge rally around Tarasinski, and through no fault of his own, Georgia just was not able to get it done that day. That was probably a bigger moment than Tarasinski was going to be, able to thrive in. But that's back, when, like, the party before the game, legendary. The party after the game, not so much. That's one of the reasons why we still enjoy these victories over Florida so much now. Let's see what else. Jerry Dog fan pointing that Zier was the quarterback when Florida had that phantom timeout. Yeah, there's Joe Cox right there. Against Arkansas, would this have been 2009? Yeah, I actually saw Cox in the background of the Stafford video we were playing a little earlier. But what were, like, his stats in the 2009 against Arkansas, where he just, he threw for, like, let me see if I can figure this out. I'll try to talk while I do this. It's just one of those sort of like one-off games. All right, I think I have this. So it's a 52-41 win over Arkansas in September of 2009. He threw for 375 yards and a school record 5 touchdowns. And he never really did anything like that again the rest of the season. That was a weird year because, remember the season opener, Georgia went to Oklahoma State and just lost? Not in, like, controversial fashion, not in, like, heartbreaking fashion, just lost. It's always weird when you watch another team kind of take a knee on Georgia. Like they just beat us. They beat us a couple touchdowns, just solidly better. Disappointing. Disappointing to say the least. Joe has gone on to a pretty productive coaching career, right? He's been in Alabama, places like that. Another example of Alabama copying Georgia, of course. But Joe Cox is sort of a big-time coach now, right? Let's see what else. Yeah, 12 of 30 the same season against Kentucky. That's rough. That's rough. Ken Holcomb says he's ready for some Braves games on my TV. Yeah, that's exciting. We got Grapefruit League action going on. But opening day will be here before you know it. And it's the best part about baseball. It's always on. Best thing about baseball is its sheer ubiquity, to use a bigger word than I should use. So the Braves are on A&L. Wow, see, this is the thing is like sports on TV is getting weird. And the fact that, are they on 46? They're like local 46 television? How about that? So the local CBS affiliate, Atlanta News First, is got the Braves on tonight. That's a different type of deal. That's kind of neat. Listen, and I know there's the big thing about Major League Baseball and ESPN parting ways, and oh boy, do I have thoughts about that. But that's probably a different topic for a different show. But for all it's getting harder to find stuff as a sports fan in general. Baseball, though, it's like an Easter egg hunt. They might as well be hiding their games under the trees. You got what? Is it FUBU? Is that what it's called? No, that's a apparel company. What's it called? Roku, not FUBU. FUBU makes clothes. Roku and Apple TV and Bally changed its name, and now I think the Braves are selling a subscription. What a mess all that is. Golly, what a mess. And Major League Baseball still has a bunch of blackouts, which is crazy too. Local market type stuff. Let us see what else. Oh, Johnny Press, speaking of one-off quarterback performances, was it 2,000 for Corey Phillips against Kentucky? And he was a walk-on. But I still see Corey Phillips every now and then. He's a good guy. He had an amazing game against Kentucky. And is it 2,000? 2,000? What an amazing game that was. That's a great example of that. Great example of that. Was it 30 for 30 he went against Kentucky? How much of this am I remembering correctly? Was it Kentucky that Phillips lit the world on fire for? Yeah, Bill Sanders says that Bally is now FanDuel. Yeah, baseball makes it so hard. Baseball makes it so hard. What's funny is like the sport is way more popular than people realize. Of the professional sports, Major League Baseball is the second most popular professional sport in America. You'd never know it because of how dumb the people that run Major League Baseball are and how weird the media landscape around sports can sometimes be. But Major League Baseball is hugely popular. And like the one thing that I guess I'll get on my soapbox about this for a second. Like the one thing that, people are saying, well, the fan base is aging. It's an aging fan base. It's shrinking and it's aging. You've heard that said. You've been to the Battery before a Braves game? Is that like an old crowd to you? I'm being serious. Is that like an old crowd to you? This idea that it's an unattractive television product because it's an aging, diminishing fan base. Really? Like, go to the games. Does it seem like everybody there's, older or younger? A lot of times, if I'm going around, one of those spots in the Battery part of the game, I'm the oldest person in the building. And I don't think of myself, hopefully, as an old person. Best I can tell, you go to the Battery, places like that, baseball seems to be pretty popular. And also, I can tell you this, as someone who has the dad of a 13-year-old son who watches nothing but baseball social media content, a lot of those channels seem to be pretty popular. This idea that somehow baseball's not reaching the younger generation. As someone who lives with the younger generation, now, it's not Major League Baseball necessarily. That you might want to address some of that. Not Major League Baseball always reaching, but seems like some of the younger generation that wants to find baseball content is finding it okay. Just maybe not from the official channels. So Corey Phillips, Kentucky, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, a 30-for-30 stretch during the game, which is just amazing. Okay, so Jeff Ingram says that Sturdivant got hurt at Oklahoma. The terrific offensive tackle got hurt, and that was the season changer. Yeah, that was not good. Good to see Isha Murphy in here. We haven't seen Isha in a while. At least I don't think I have. No, we got to get ready to go. Tennille getting ready to check out. Good stuff there. UGA Marine says that Max Scherzer is complaining about the robot strike zone. He says he got mad because his strikes called by ump proved to be balls. Yeah, I mean, pitchers, like good pitchers, good catchers, have completely benefited from the human element of the game. Completely benefited from the human element of the game. Especially these catchers. I mean, a lot of what these catchers are doing now, I mean, it's amazing how they frame. Amazing. All of them, know how to get underneath the ball, bring it into the zone, catching like that. You're catching like that on inside corner to a right-handed pitcher, boom, right back in the zone. Like some of these guys are just wizards with that. And part of what has been the sport is, okay, on a 2-strike pitch, I'm going to see as a pitcher how much I can get away with. How much off the plate can I put it where you'll still swing at it, and where the umpire, if I'm hitting my spot, maybe he still gives it to me. I'm not really in favor of robot umps. I'm really not. I like the human element. Randy asking about Eddie again. Eddie, Randy, I addressed that a little earlier. I addressed that earlier. I saw your comment. I addressed that earlier. Yeah, by the way, yesterday afternoon, Georgia does get a baseball win at Georgia State. Strange place for college baseball. Strange. I think Georgia State's building a new stadium, I think. I think they're actually building at the site of the old Fulton County Stadium, which is next to, I think I'm right about this, next to where they play football, which is the old Turner Field. But where they play now, I mean, there are a lot of high schools that have nicer, facilities than that. Most of them probably do in this area. But Georgia does go play there in the afternoon, come from behind winning against Georgia State, but the softball team did drop a game. All right, let's see what else. Lance D says the Braves are going to miss Darno. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with, the overall depth, obviously, last year, to have a guy like that as your second catcher you could use as a DH, that's pretty valuable. Oh, my goodness, there's some crazy stuff on here. Chef Jay Bowen says, oh, yeah, by the way, who coached all those quarterbacks you're talking about? So there you go with that. Anything else? Philip Jordan Wells says condos and parking lots stand on top of the old Fulton County. I thought I heard they were, am I wrong about this? Did I not hear they were building something right next to them? All right, so they are doing that. Now, maybe it's not right where, Fulton County was, but it's in that same general spot. Okay, yeah. So the Hank Aaron sign, if you drive over there now, you see the area where Hank hit his 715th. That's actually going to be inside there. You talk about like Georgia State has essentially just had a whole athletic department given to them. It's just amazing. They had a football stadium essentially given to them for free, I think. And now they're going to have a chance to play baseball with like a terrific homage to Hank Aaron. Talk about an athletic department that is just sort of fallen into. Unbelievable generosity. It seems like that is the case, at least the best that I can tell. Yeah, Bill Sanders also says plans are for Georgia State to build a new baseball facility on the exact footprint of the old Atlanta Stadium. I mean, you talk about boy, that's good fortune right there. That is good fortune, I reckon. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that, including as the hot weather probably gets here. And that's nice and pleasant right now, but it's also AC time. And eventually those ACs kick on and stay on. You know what that's like around here. So go ahead and get your air conditioning tuned up to factory fresh specs online at rsandrews.com. They'll keep you nice and cool and comfortable. Somebody may have told you need a new unit. Well, eventually you might, but RS Andrews may be able to tell you how to get some new life out of your old unit, and it may only cost you $99 to get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. All of that online at rsandrews.com. You have a great day. Back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll close out the week strong with you then. Talk to you soon, everybody.